Hi, everybody. Welcome to Megan's Monday Market Update. As always, I've got Matt Stancato here with Guild Mortgage Lending. And today we're just going to be going over a few more things around interest rates, but as well as the multifamily unit space and some trends I am seeing. Matt, you can go first and let us know. Are interest rates still holding below 7% on average? Have they gone back up? Are they coming down anymore? Where are we at?
Definitely still below 7% on average. What we've been seeing over the past couple of weeks is two steps forward, two steps back. We're seeing a price improvement and then a price deterioration, and then two price improvements and then three price deteriorations. We're really holding right at that 7% line as far as there appears to be some resistance there where rates don't want to go that high and they keep on bouncing up against it. Right now, for a decently priced 30-year fixed rate loan at 0.675 is not out of the question for anyone. And if you want to go FHA, because of the required mortgage insurance, it's even cheaper than that in most cases. So we are edging back toward that really friendly interest rate territory.
Awesome. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. I've been very excited at seeing those interest rates as well as I've been looking for my own properties. One thing I wanted to talk about today is the multi-unit space. Now, multi-unit is categorized, I should emphasize small multi-unit is categorized as like 4 units or less, right? And one of the reasons why I think there's a little bit of a higher demand in this space is one, education. I think people are becoming more educated that they can use financing that they would otherwise use maybe for a single family home on these multifamilies. So
Well,
I was hoping you could share a little bit about that.
yeah, I was going to say, let's stop right there and talk about that because that's a really big thing. We've been seeing a ton of that. As there have been fewer and fewer traditional single family homes on the market for buyers, we are seeing a lot of buyers say, okay, well, what if I live in a multifamily instead? And the great thing about that is that a lot of multifamily properties are things that aren't looked at by your standard single family borrowers. And it can have a financial advantage for you because you're allowed to move into one side, let's say, of a duplex, rent out the other side, and use that income to qualify in a lot of cases. So people opening their minds to living in multifamily units again isn't so much a new idea as it is a reversion to an old idea. If you look at old school Westchester, tons of duplexes and twins that were owned on one side by the friendly old lady and rented out on the other side, and that was the Westchester I grew up in. So to me, this is kind of a reversion to type.
Yes, yes, and I think there's a level of education that's now at everyone's fingertips with the internet, right? So whether you actively listen to it or not, you've most people have heard of Bigger Pockets, and there's so many other resources. But this is a strategy that is heavily emphasized on their network, and it seems to be kind of like this growing phenomenon that people are attracted to. So I feel like now that you've got this desire, this interest, people fully starting to understand that this is even an option for them, it becomes somewhat of a no-brainer for many people because they go, wait, my mortgage is higher, interest rates are higher, but you're telling me that I can divide that mortgage maybe with a tenant or maybe even with family. I'm seeing where there are families who with maybe in-laws or sisters kind of going in and saying, "Hey, we can divide up this cost." So I think it's a great idea, but with this higher demand and interest in this space, there's not many listings on the market. So there's been a lot of competition in this space.
And higher prices as well, of course. Now, the best thing about a multi-unit is in a lot of cases, you don't really mind paying a little bit more for a multi-unit than you might otherwise because you know you have the income coming in from the other side. A couple great things about it. Live in one side and rent the other. It eliminates the, oh man, it's my Sunday and I have to drive all the way across town and go fix somebody's toilet. So instead of that, it's, oh, I have to walk across there and fix somebody's toilet, which isn't as bad in the long run. Also, you have that extra income coming in, and what might be a 1750, if that's high for you for a mortgage, okay. But if you're renting the other one out for 750, well, now you're effectively $1,000 out of pocket, and even if there are some extra expenses, you're in great shape. So I think the only thing that holds people back is that people have this idea that they don't want to live permanently in a space attached to somebody else. And like you said, if you're living with family, that no longer is really a concern. And the other idea is people don't plan to do this permanently. It's a first house, it's a second house, and then when you move forward, you're allowed to keep the house as an investment property but you're allowed to, if you were there for at least 1 year, maintain your owner occupied rate on your mortgage. Now you have an investment property on the cheap that's giving you two lines of income. And I know somebody who's taken advantage of this several times and done really well with it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love this strategy. I think it's fantastic. If you have no kids, you should totally be doing this, first of all. I can understand some people maybe being a little bit more hesitant as you have kids because yeah, it's not everyone's favorite thing to do. But it's great in the sense that we can talk about these properties a little bit more. I've got properties that are like one on top of the other, kind of apartment style. There are properties where there are two units on one lot that are completely detached. You got to really open your mind, open your parameters to seeing what types of things are out there. It is great when you consider, or my husband and I have considered, that we're only going to do this for a season.
Mhm.
So if you go back, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago, there was this concept of a starter home.
Mhm.
And a starter home was generally a small, tiny, maybe 1,000 square foot property that maybe had two bedrooms and a bath. And it was just get in the door, get a property, newlyweds, starting a family. And the concept was that in a couple of years, you could sell it, take the equity, and go buy something else.
Mhm.
Well, the starter home vision may have changed quite a bit with the high demand and not many listings. Those tiny homes are pretty expensive these days and are going for a pretty penny. The new starter home, in my mind, is the house hacking. It is a great place to start to build equity, to build income, like all the things you just mentioned, that will really set you up to be able to move on to the next home, maybe your dream home. So,
I think that's a really wise way to look at it. I actually hadn't considered it quite in those terms before, but a starter house was an important step, like a starter job is an important step. I'm not trying to make my living here. I'm trying to learn skills and get myself a little bit of a nest egg so I can move forward to the next step. And whatever that property looks like for you is effective in accomplishing that goal. I will say as well that there are even properties, as long as the square footage of a property, which is mixed commercial and residential use, is 25% or less commercial space, you're allowed to finance that residentially as well. So if you find a place where you have two really nice units over top of an old storefront, and you think to yourself, well, I could take my side hustle down there and I could live up top in one of the units, and then I have a tenant in the unit above. Absolutely, that's the kind of stuff we do. And
so much flexibility there, right? Because if you're somebody who is self-employed or you have your own business, now you have a space to operate that business. And even if you don't want to, again, it's just a lease, right? It's a commercial lease, but is a lease nonetheless that you are also giving out to somebody else. There are so many properties that meet that description all over Pennsylvania, in these smaller towns, Westchester, all the way out to, Phoenixville, all across the board.
they have the glass windows in the front, and then on top of that, there's two floors of living space. And in almost every case, the space up top is bigger than the space downstairs because of the display area. So you end up having it less than 25% of those things. I mean, darned if they're not financeable. I mean, it surprises us sometimes too. But yeah, I'd say as a buyer right now in 2025, if you're buying your first home, keep your mind open and remember that it doesn't have to look like what you want the final home to look like.
Yes, yes. It's always be flexible and adapt to the current market. Be strategic, right? That's the one thing I always say is just think about it, talk to an agent, talk to a lender, and get all the information. But when we were talking about that specific example, let's say that storefront with the two units above is a $600,000 property.
Mhm.
You just shared with us that we can offset that mortgage and qualify because of the other two leases.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an actual numerical example of a property
Okay.
we did in Westchester. This is in the borough of Westchester. $700,000 for a display area downstairs. This is right off Market Street, and three units upstairs, as it turned out being two full floor apartments and one third floor apartment, which also had some storage up top. So when we looked at that, it was $700,000. They did it as an owner occupied property for one of the units, and then they were going to run the business themselves. So they wrote themselves a lease um, from their business, which was completely separate, and it was not held as an LLC. It was a true corp, and they wrote a lease from the company to themselves. They then rented out one of the properties on top, plus the smaller apartment on top. When you put all of that together, their effective out of pocket for 10% down on a $700,000 house in Westchester was less than $50,000, and
That's
their monthly payment ends up being less than 2,000.
that's fantastic.
It
I
was
mean,
the way they
and for
wrote.
context, we're talking about prime location, prime setting, Westchester and Chester County, PA. You know, it's generally hard to
You
find a
got how
property
wide
of
your
this magnitude under almost 900, let's be honest. So that was a great deal. But I loved how you emphasized how he went about using the leases from his business to offset the cost. That was fantastic. So this is the type of creative financing that if you have somebody to talk to, you may be the perfect candidate for something like this, you know?
you'd
So
be surprised how easy it is if you are flexible about your area. If you don't not married to a school district, if you're okay with this street versus that street, and what that translates to is usually if you don't have kids, and you can be a little more open about your options. The chances to build equity as a young person are huge.
yes, absolutely. Well, I'm so glad we talked on this a little bit today. It was one of my favorite topics. So yeah.
If you have any questions about this, of course, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're happy to answer them. There's never a fee for calling us up and chatting away.
Absolutely. Anyway, I appreciate everyone's time. Hope you have a great week. As always, I will link Matt's information at the bottom and mine. So if you have specific questions and you are curious about what your options are, go ahead and hit us up.
See you later. Thanks so much.
Thanks.